So, Bryce, now let's get in a little bit more in depth as to who you are.
Okay, Bryce Everett. I have a long history, been in agriculture, family farming, and managing that. Also in oil and gas negotiations and consulting. But with GSCG, I'm the guy that helps build the system and sees the big picture, the inner workings, making sure everything works well. Um, but I wear a lot of hats, like you said. I will be meeting. I may be out meeting with ranchers, talking out in their pasture, or I may be up in Chicago having meetings with Jack. So I've been very much looking forward to this and hope to answer all your questions.
All of them, Corey.
All the questions. And he doesn't have a hat on right
Oh,
now, but he said he wears all of them.
yeah, there's a lot of hats. This is quite the undertaking, and we have a really, really good team, and not only the people, but I mean, all the things that we put in place technology wise, people, relationships, to do this takes a lot. And we have top notch team and resources to get this done.
So, right off the website, right off the Global Smart Commodity Group website, Corey, it says trading the future today. And then there's some more words, but then they put in the words blockchain.
Oh.
And I don't know if I fully understand what that is. So I know we're going to talk about the blockchain here a little bit down the road. But first of all, what's the goal? You said you're excited about Global Smart Commodity Group. What's its purpose?
The purpose is to actually take the cash markets, whether they be the cattle market, whether it be the feeder market, whether it be the soybean market, all the markets that we traded as secondary derivatives at the exchange level. I want to take them and have them kicking and screaming and being dragged into the 21st century. And what do I mean by that? Well, right now we still actually trade cattle on a mark that comes to us once a week. Think of how inefficient and how insane that is when you have operations and trades that are taking place daily. When you have those type of inefficiencies that take place, obviously they need solutions. A quick story that I'll share with you is when I was president of Commerce Bank, we had Nestle's as one of our largest clients, and we would take delivery on large amounts of sugar. And 9 times out of 10, those deliveries were either inferior or they were inefficient, whatever it might be, and we had to actually credit the buyer. So this became more of an art form. It was never an exact science. Well, now we have got data capture. We have got the blockchain, which we'll talk about, which actually can take that data and put it onto a verified network that nobody can alter, nobody can do any adulteration to it. And now you're looking at that data and you know exactly what you're buying, the source of what you're buying, where it was born, where it was actually vaccinated, where it was raised, what it was given to be, fed, and all the way through where it was slaughtered, how it was processed. These are things that are missing right now within our supply chain. And quite frankly, it's people like Bryce who deal with it on a day-to-day basis, who see it, that have brought a lot of these things to our attention. I see it from 30,000 feet. I see it as somebody who looks at those inefficiencies and says, okay, we got to plug this hole and plug that hole. Bryce is down there talking to the people, that are dealing with those inefficiencies on a daily basis, and he could probably fill you in a little bit more.
Yeah, what's it mean to you, Bryce?
Well, I think we all can agree that there's a need for this, that there are inefficiencies. We can do better. We now have so many more tools that weren't available to us in the past that are now at our fingertips. I mean, like the phone's in your hands, like that's a big deal. I can grab up my phone and pretty much figure out anything I want to in the world. But when it comes to the commodities and the markets and everything, take cattle, for instance. Like, how do you want to sell your cattle? Like, if you want to do market them some way besides stockyards or having a buyer come out. And probably what I see the most is people trying to do stuff on Facebook that doesn't even allow it. We don't have a good electronic exchange for cash commodities. And, with what we have going, the technology, building all that in, I think it's been needed for a long time. And I'm very excited about it. This is a big deal. It's going to change everything.
If I can add one thing, this was something that's been talked about for years and years, but what's really happened is it's during the pandemic, we saw the problems really emerge. We saw the supply chains seize up. We saw things happening that shouldn't have happened. And quite frankly, whether they be international issues, whether they be domestic issues, these are things that needed to be addressed. And what really helps solve that problem is when you have commodities on what I call a single source of truth, so that you actually know the source and origin of everything. So, for example, if you're a farmer, you can go from seed to sale, knowing exactly what you have, where it was planted, especially the poor farmer who's growing non-GMO corn, who's not getting the right price for it, or something that's being grown as a specialty product. These are the things that need to be addressed. And again, as Bryce was saying, we now have the technology to be able to get it done. Remember, a lot of these markets have not changed. They traded rice in Osaka 400 years ago and tulips in Amsterdam, 400 years ago, and it's essentially the same thing as the way we were doing it just 20 years ago. Now technology has brought us into a digital age. And with it come these digital tools. And these digital tools bring efficiency. And that's really what GSCG is all about.
Did you hear that, Tanner? He said the poor farmer's growing non-GMO corn. That's me.
And you're going to get the same price.
I'm the poor farmer. Yeah, not getting paid the right price for my corn.
That's exactly right. Look, you know what? We've come across this time and time again. And it's not only you. Look, we're talking about everybody out there that creates product, that creates a service. We find that they end up getting the short end of the stick. It's the intermediary that ends up making the lion's share of what's going on. And it's really our job to disintermediate them, and to make it so that it's easier for somebody like you to go straight to the marketplace, so that an Albertsons or somebody that wants that non-GMO corn for what they want to produce can buy it directly from you, or whoever that might be. I'm using Albertsons as an example.
Have you thought about going to Facebook Marketplace and putting an ad out there saying I've got 100,000 bushels of non-GMO corn?
This was pre-Facebook Marketplace. This was Craigslist. so this was...
There's no scams there, is there?
Yeah, like about 6-7 years ago when we started talking about this, we started growing, I wouldn't say 100% non-GMO, but maybe 25 to 40% of non-GMO, mainly just for the seed cost, and then the stuff performs on our ground, as long as there isn't a pest problem. And I went directly. I went to Craigslist. I went to a couple local feed mills, a specialty company that grows or mixes like a racing pigeon food, and they want high antioxidant, really good quality stuff. And I tell you what, they weren't willing to pay much for what I had, or if they did, they wanted a very small quantity. Yeah, there just was not the markets.
They wanted to fill up the pickup bed, the truck of the bed of the pickup.
Yeah, or like one load every month type of deal, and it just didn't work with the commodities that we had and the flow. So
do you guys see there being an issue? I'll start with you, Bryce. An issue with farmers adopting the technology that's available? I mean, like I said, nothing's changed in a long period of time. What do you see producers...
Or do the farmers even need to adopt it?
There hasn't been a lot of change with the markets, but there has been a lot of change elsewhere. A lot of the stuff that you guys cover on your podcast. So the other day you were talking about the $12,000 monitor that just changes the airflow inside the pig barns and stuff like that. That's new. It's been adopted. I got into a tractor the other day. It was a Fendt. I can't remember what the number was on it, but my goodness, all the buttons and screens and connected with GPS, and it's amazing. So I think farmers and ranchers will definitely adopt the technology because I just, to be competitive, they're going to have to. It's changing. I think the average age of the farmer is 68 in the United States, something like that. The other generations are coming in, but yeah, it's definitely needed. Yeah. The technology is not a problem, I don't think, because pretty much everybody's carrying it around in their phone. That's what we're going to ask of people.
So
to have something like that, so we can provide them so many other avenues.
So let's talk about the technology. What is Blockchain. I've got a little idea, but let's hear it from the experts.
Blockchain, simply put, is a peer-to-peer network, is really what it is, where it actually takes data and keeps it and actually secures it so that it can't be altered. Yeah, and it's very important for people to understand what blockchain is as a technology as opposed to what cryptocurrencies are, because the two seem to get confused way too often.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of blockchain is to provide simple solutions. It's so that you don't have to go out there and verify something. It's pure verification. It goes through everything, all this network, this peer-to-peer network, and then all these various networks have their reasons for existing. Remember, cryptocurrencies exist because blockchain exists. Blockchain is just a platform. It's a technology by which you can do most other things. What we've chosen to do with it is to create what we call a smart contract. And that is where what I mentioned before, that single source of truth. So somebody can know what they are getting from inception, from a genetic marker all the way on through. And why is that important? Well, I remember back in 02 and 03 when we had mad cow disease, and they had a real problem trying to figure out what the source of meat was. And we realized back then that we had to figure that out. But we didn't have the technology back in 02 and 03 to take care of that. All we had to do was, take cattle to slaughter faster is really our solution for it at that point in time. It sent the spreads crazy. It really did havoc to those of us that were working on the derivative side. But just going back to one of the questions that you asked about the farmer and about the acceptance. One thing to keep in mind is whenever you're addressing inefficiencies within a market structure, you get resistance, especially from those that capitalize on those inefficiencies. Every market we have ever launched, and I've been part of launching dozens, have gotten a lot of resistance from people. And who are those people? Those are the people that are making a lot of money on those inefficiencies. So going back to it, that same farmer, as Bryce was saying, that's now 68 years old, that next farmer that comes in and takes his place, whether it be his son, whether it be somebody who comes in and buys, it's going to be younger. It's going to be a lot more technologically savvy. And I'm saying my generation, I'm 61. I'm an immigrant to technology. I was brought into technology, kicking and screaming. I bought my first computer, I think, when I was in my 30s. My children are in their 30s. They were born with technology.
Right.
Just like this next generation of farmers are going to be born with technology in their hands, and now they'll be looking for solutions to use that technology in the right way, and we are that solution for them.
And I'm glad that he shared with us that there is a difference between cryptocurrencies and blockchain, because I know what the buzzword, it's FTX right now that declared bankruptcy, and now you're wanting us as podcast listeners to jump into the blockchain. Well, if you didn't know there's a difference.
Huge difference. And what's funny, it's funny you bring up FTX. There was a great interview that Terry Duffy, who's chairman of the CME Group, who's a very good friend of mine, had on TV about a year ago, where he called him a fraud. He said, what you're doing is fraudulent. All right. And it's funny. It took a futures trader, all right, to be able to point that out. All right. Because when you started to realize what he was doing, it was a shell game. And, people were calling him a genius and everything else. And I don't want to get into it. But the reality is that the people started, and when I say people, I'm talking about the general public, started to confuse the technology with one of the products that the technology ended up producing, which is a cryptocurrency. That same technology has been doing wonders in the almond industry. I don't know if you know that. In the medical device industry, in various industries where it's absolutely essential. And in our defense industry. Remember, what was an anti-China sentiment has turned into an anti-China policy. So now they can go from mine to magnet and be able to track and trace the origin of everything, of all the cobalt, of all the titanium that's being mined out. So going back to our supply chains here in the Midwest. Well, why is that so important? Well, because it's going to be essential for people to know exactly if they are getting Iowa corn. All right. Are they getting Illinois soybeans? And who cares about that? I'll tell you, everybody around the world. Anyone that we ship it to wants to now know the source, the origin of where that product came from. They want to make sure it's not an inferior product. They want to make sure that it didn't come from China. They want to make sure it came from a friendly nation. These are all things that are being written into the script, which we've never really had before. And I think that, as we see that paradigm shifting, we're layering ourselves into that shift.
Boy, Nebraska is going to struggle when people start saying they don't want Nebraska corn. That is going to be a problem.
It is. It's
Well, they'll stick with the Omaha beef.
Yeah, there you go.
They got a nice brand with that.
There you go.
And they got to make sure they protect that, and this is a good way to protect that too.
So I've got a couple examples that I just thought in my head as you were talking through stuff. I kind of see a good side of this, and then I kind of see like a stopping the bad side. So you said mad cow, right? Back in the early 2000s.
Yep.
So instead of banning beef from a whole region or a whole country or you could possibly use the blockchain to know exactly what farm or what source that came from, and maybe not disrupt so much markets.
And for anybody that was out in Europe back then and saw these funeral pyres and smokestacks, and I remember going and saying, "What is that? And what does that smell?" They said they're burning cattle. And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It just blew my mind. And I think that's really, with a world that is desperate for food, all right, desperate for the right type of supply chains, to see something like that was heartbreaking. And I come from an Armenian background where we had people starving a couple of generations ago. So that, it hit me even harder just to see that kind of thing. But so for just to go back to it, I think that you're right. I think, when we can go to the source of something, and Bryce, you might want to touch on this because, you see it on a daily basis.
Sure. I don't think that we're so much trying to work on any bans or anything, but just getting good information. It's about information and data. The more information, the better we can make decisions and bring those markets together. The blockchain, to me, is just like I put it more simply than Jack does, but it's just a giant math problem that can't be changed or broken. It's permanent and it's guaranteed. So we bring that guarantee into the markets. You spoke about FTX also, and like FTX had a world of problems going on. I mean, let alone not even having a board. That's nowhere near our structure. Boards and USDA and SEC, all the good things that we have to have. And, welcome to make this perfect and reliable and trusted.
Yeah. And how many times have you seen a year, you get a lettuce that gets recalled for salmonella or E. coli or something from some big company, and the whole company's stuff gets taken off the shelves?
right.
And maybe they could get the farm that it came from and not disrupt the market so much.
Well, not so much that, but just creating the benefits.
Yep.
So with the track and trace and the blockchain, we can use that to create value. Like with your GMO corn, like we created value there and get you out into a market that is vast compared to, we have not broken into the racing pigeon segment yet, but maybe someday.
Yeah.
But that's what we're trying to do is open up all those markets through a trusted source.
So to make this applicable today, you're saying that after this call, you could have more of a conversation with Corey, and he's already got the information that you would need to verify that his corn is non-GMO, and you could potentially provide more value to Corey today?
Oh, without question. In fact, I'm going to jump in for that one, Bryce, because I love that. We could create a spec for the non-GMO corn specifically, all right, and have it probably up within a week. And now that spec, all right, as long as we can verify that data and it gets tested properly and it goes through all the channels and the stringent channels that we make sure of, and through that authentication, right, we now put it out on a listing, and now that listing goes out to the world. The world can see that listing. So now it's not only Facebook. Now they're seeing it in a central price discovery mechanism, a trusted source, as Bryce said, where they can go and they can understand that things are tested, that there's a third-party source of inspection, that there is, this is not, Jack and Bryce's, auction shop. This is a world that we eventually will end up taking to the regulators because we'll end up looking at secondary derivatives on what we're trading, because we're trading things that are very unique as we start to see them and through that maturation process. But just going back to it, if you've got a product that you want to list on the exchange, if it's a solid product that can't be manipulated, and that's very important, all right? Because what we have to do is we have to make sure that things are not subject to manipulation, whether it's you as a farmer trying to manipulate the price, or whether it's a speculator or somebody else coming in here and trying to push your price down. So that's the one thing that we also are very, very cognizant of. So we're, for example, we don't allow short sellers. We don't allow somebody to come in and speculate in our market. This is a market that's really B2B. It's really there for farmers and for end users to be able to do transactions.
So Bryce, in Corey's instance here, say we do what needs to get done to get it verified. He shows you the hybrid that was planted. He shows all the maps, the sprayer passes.
Send some grain in for testing.
Send the grain in for testing. Maybe he even seals a bin. This has been tested. Now it's sealed, padlocked. It's got a certification on it. What does that look like for him? What's that process look like?
Well, he will take all that information, put it into our system. It'll make a lot for him. That lot will be live. It'll be on the market for all the buyers to come to the marketplace and see what's available to them with, logistics built in. So if he's looking for somewhere to just deliver, he can see what contracts are open that are needing to be filled. He can figure that out before he even plants the crop. But the buyers come to see his lot and they make an agreement and the deal is done, and it's easy and it brings so many people together. Like around here, we hope that the wheat truck makes it to the closest elevator sometimes. That's not a very good way of doing it. So getting the price discovery from, a lot larger market, is just huge. Calling around on the phone, what are you offering for this? What are you offering this? I hope to see that be over with.
Yeah.
I want to have it in one place where I can see my inputs, my outputs, the values with transportation included, and the niche markets. If I'm doing something to create value, I want to be compensated for it. When it comes to cattle, there's only a few different things that you can do to get compensated very easily. The certified Angus beef and then non-hormones. But there's a whole lot more that people are doing and can do, but right now they're just not being compensated for it.
So that's a very small example of talking my example, right, Tanner? Commodities are much, much larger than that. We're talking millions of bushels and hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds of beef and all that. Are we cutting out? Is this going to cut out the middlemen, or how do we get the rubber to the ground for the actual large commodity industry?
Well, first of all, I think that we want to take a step back. One of the things we are trying to do is kind of push it from both sides, right? And you want to squeeze. When you're squeezing from both sides, that's when the middleman gets squeezed. Right now, I think that we can all agree that the lion's share, the fat, in if there is any, is being taken by people right in the middle. All right, and that's really what we're trying to address. So as we go down this path, we have to understand that we can never get rid of a Goldman Sachs or a Merrill Lynch. They will always be there as part of the process, but they're no longer charging 25 cents a share to be able to trade. They're no longer charging the types of money that they used to, the 5% to manage your money the way they used to. All of those things have been compressed. Their sales, their commissions have been compressed. And I bring that up as an example because the agricultural sector is the last sector to find those efficiencies. They have found them in fixed income. They found them in real estate. They have found them in the equity markets. But yet the agricultural markets are the last ones to really embrace those efficiencies. And when they do, I think what you'll find, more than any other phenomenon, more than any other thing, is the fact that people are going to go, where has this been my entire life? It's like every other asset class that ends up emerging. Once it comes out and starts trading, people start to say, why haven't we done this before? And that's really, I think, where we're going to end up with this type of technology embedded in the agricultural sector.
But what about our co-ops? You You're talking middlemen, and that's what first came to my mind. Well, those are member-owned co-ops. Part of the patronage goes back into the farmer's pocket. We preach all around our territories that the co-op is a viable portion of the community. It creates all these jobs. It gives money back to the schools. But if we squeeze them, is there less of that happening?
Well, I'm going to say something, and I'll let Bryce address that too. I spoke at a conference once, and I believe it was in Sioux Falls. I'm trying to remember. This was a few years back. And I asked the question, and everybody laughed. I said, does anybody know of a co-op that loses money? And everybody in that room laughed. You know why? Because we all know co-ops don't lose money. Okay? And that's the one thing to keep in mind. A co-op is not necessarily always there to serve the best interest of the farmer.
I echo that.
And you know, when we come to that conclusion, and I think that's a healthy conclusion to come to, all right, then you start seeing the benefits of what we're trying to do. And Bryce, do you want to address that a little bit?
Sure. Well, co-ops, love them. Spent a lot of time there. Love hearing the old guys talk about how it used to be and drink their coffee and all that good stuff. But locally where we are, a lot of the co-ops are being bought out by, global companies. So it's not that, they don't have the same level of responsibility that they once had. They try to provide a good service and everything, but it's not like what it used to be. Like here locally, my grandfather helped build the silo. It's still there. And that's something cool to see, but it's now private. It's not, the co-op association anymore. But the market, we want to create the market, and whatever happens to the market is, true. It's going to dictate what it needs to do. And if, co-op associations or private companies or whoever is inefficient, that will show, and it's going to be for the best for the producers and the ultimate users of the products.
Will this eliminate the Chicago Board of Trade?
No. Remember, the Board of Trade, in fact, it'll complement the Board of Trade in many ways. What we would do is, remember, the Board of Trade they're trading secondary derivatives, and theirs is a standardized contract. What we will do is we'll end up with maybe 80 different listings, for example, of corn or soybeans that are very, very unique in their growth and very unique in where they are grown and their region and all the rest of that. And then we will show tracking error along with where the soybean market is trading in the futures. So now we'll allow both markets to be able to trade. It'll give that trader the ability to be able to maybe put on a hedge in the event that they end up putting on one of the cash positions. So we can incorporate the two, which will also, by the way, create capital efficiencies internally. You don't have to put up two haircuts. You could be a true hedger if you really need to be. But it would literally complement every secondary derivative that's out there once we end up with a vibrant underlying cash market and a central price discovery mechanism, which right now does not exist in the agricultural markets.
So we're learning during this episode what the blockchain can establish. We know that it's going to track, there's going to be traceability. We're going to fix inefficiencies. We know that this is going to allow for true price discovery. If Dave was sitting here, he'd say that's what auctions do. Well, this is going to do the same thing.
That's right.
It's going to provide price discovery. It's going to bring equity back to the farmer, taking away a portion of that margin that was in the original middleman. So when you talk about bringing extra value, do you see state associations stepping up and creating a brand, creating a product? Like this is Iowa Corn. The Iowa Corn Growers Association is sponsoring the package that is Iowa Corn because it's far superior to any other state. Do you see that happening, Bryce?
I think it's definitely a possibility. There's so many different organizations that want to brand their stuff. People want to know about where their food's coming from. They want to know about the quality. They care about health. Our research shows the number one thing is price, and the number two is health. So if we can key in on the health part and create value there, it helps with pricing for the producer.
Yeah, so it's like Texas cattle, California dairy. There's things like that we can do.
So there's I mean, there's so many programs like the vaccination programs, non-hormone, non-GMO, the state stuff. Trying to think what else. Breed associations. Like, where do you go to sell registered cattle? Like, there's not a marketplace for it. I mean, you pretty much open up the gates to your farm and have an auction. There's not really a good place to place registered cattle. Like, the breed association is going to absolutely love it. It's going to give a spot for everyone at the table, and they are more than welcome.
So do you see that being one of the first quick adopters, maybe the low-hanging fruit? Is it in the cattle marketplace because there isn't a good mechanism right now?
We're putting a lot of effort into cattle just because it's tough. If you can do cattle, I think you can do anything. Yeah. There's so many moving pieces and intricacies that go with cattle. We've identified, I think, 30 different categories with multiple different options, and I equate that over to a master lock, and imagine a master lock with 30 rollers and 5 different options. Like, it's the trying to describe a group of cattle is tough, and even if, like, you and I are sitting there, like, it's tough. We may have different ideas of what they are, but doing that, started there, and then I've gone into other projects, but that one's a tough thing to do, and that is a lot of the reason that the barrier to that it hasn't been done yet is it's complicated. But,
and if I could add something, Bryce, Tanner, it's not low-hanging fruit, just so you know. We don't see it as low-hanging fruit. We see it as a challenge. And that's kind of why we wanted to go after cattle. As I said earlier, it's got that once-a-week mark. So we knew that it was going to have some very difficult nuances to it. But as Bryce said, if we could do this with cattle, which we're very, very I think confident that we'll be able to do. There's nothing stopping us. Think of every product out there. Think of every commodity out there that needs this type of platform, that needs to be able to guarantee their source. And this is really what it's all about.
How about an industry beyond cattle that, like hogs or chicken, that has gotten so vertically integrated?
So now you're talking my game.
Yeah.
So we're talking free-range chickens, for example, which, by the way, are all the rage right now, yeah. and people are asking me about that. And we know the hog industry, and we know some of the push and pull from the hogs. And of course, I traded hogs back at CME, so for me that's got a warm spot in my heart. But yes, not only are we looking at ags and meats, but we're also looking at other markets. For example, we're looking at metals. We're looking at reclaimed aluminum. We're looking at reclaimed cobalt, reclaimed lithium, reclaimed, and these are all reclaimed markets for a reason. We don't want to go to people that are actually mining these products. We want to go to people that are reclaiming them, because down the road, these are people that might be eligible for carbon credits. Which they are now, which they would be creating by the fact that they are no longer mining these things. So, we're looking at a lot of different things. And remember, the only way you could really, truly put a carbon credit together, in my mind, is not the way it's being done today with these voluntary carbon credits, where you're going to take somebody's word for it, but rather have it on the blockchain. All right, have that verification all the way on through, so that all right, if something is registered, what it's being registered for, how that's saving carbon, and what that carbon footprint is all the way on through. So we don't have John Oliver, all right, doing a special on us, all right, talking about how what we did was complete BS.
I told you, Tanner. I told you. Carbon needs to be on the blockchain.
You've
because
said that
it is
for
the wild,
years.
wild west. There's no regulation. Not that we want more regulation, but dang it, there's no one verifying anything.
That's right.
And there needs to be a traded space, something that's establishing a price for the carbon credit. Everyone's just throwing out, well, it could be $50 a ton, it could be $25. We don't know. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
There's no standard for it. So, you guys, farmers are some of the biggest capturers of carbon around. I mean, you think about how much carbon is pulled into a cornfield, or how much carbon's put in the ground by cattle and manure. They shouldn't start at zero. They should start off with, man, we are doing a really good job. But it seems like a lot of people want to start at zero.
Well, yeah, we can't get qualified for carbon credits unless we change something on our farm, even though we're capturing hundreds of tons of carbon with a corn crop or a soybean crop. Like it's just crazy.
Well, there's got
farmers-
to be some scientific methodology behind it too, unfortunately, and it takes some time. We've seen it, by the way, with some of the ag industry. In fact, the dairy farmers, those that understand the use of belchers, are finding the carbon credit market to be very, very lucrative. They're making probably an extra 20 to 30% on their actual product based off of the carbon credits that they're capturing.
Yikes. But yeah, you're right.
That's
You've
a whole
been
nother
saying
show. It's a
I
whole
think it
nother
is. It is. So your website also states that this is truly a global market.
Yes.
This is something that could benefit trade relationships. I mean, right now Mexico's in the news. They do
Yeah.
no more. It's no more genetically modified corn.
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Well,
want it.
our investors, just so you know, are from New Zealand initially. And they came to me when I was on the floor of the CME group and said, Jack, we want to come to you. We understand you have a concept for an exchange that can verify what we're growing. And remember, they represent people out of the Kiwi region, so they want to maintain their brands. They've got lamb coming out of there. They've got kiwi coming out of there. They've got honey coming out of there. A lot of stuff is being exported to Europe. There are certain articles and certain things that are coming into New Zealand that have to be proven out for the pharmaceutical use. So all of that is really where the technology started to be developed. And then when I saw it being formed, I remember going to Terry Duffy at the CME Group, and I said, Terry, listen, I got a new way to trade cash commodities here, which could really change the way they're being traded now. And he turned to me, laughed, and he said, build it and come back to me. and that's really what the genesis of all this was. And we were lucky to get geniuses like Bryce around us that could give us the direction that we need.
So this, though, potentially using this real life example right now of Mexico's ordinance, the law they're putting in place to where they're not going to, if it stands. I know there's a lot of discussions already happening to modify their stance, but they could potentially come into this exchange and identify all their corn needs because of the traceability back to Corey's farm and farmers like him that are producing non-GMO corn.
Spot on. Mm-hmm. Spot on. And here, let's take it to another example. Another example that was a little bit more recent was the embargo on steel and aluminum dumping. All right, and what if? And they put on these crazy embargoes because they wanted to make sure that China wasn't dumping. Well, if there was a way to be able to verify from mine all the way to steel facility to magnet, to car manufacturer, where that steel was manufactured, how it came out of the ground, where it was smelted, which right now, you can sign a document, all right, but you don't know. It could be smelted out of China. So all of that, those are things that would absolutely be wonderful uses for blockchain technology. And not only that, and I say this sincerely, our supply chains they're stressed at best. All right, we've seen that stress take place, and the worst thing that we could possibly ever imagine in our lives is a seizure of those supply chains. And it's because of that we've got to maintain a good control out of what we see as the source of where these things are being produced. And if we can keep control of that source, it's maintaining control of the supply chain. Every major Fortune 500 company has control of their supply chain. Well, we as a country need to have control over our food supply chain. And that's what we're trying to help do.
Woof.
That's good.
So we know there's value, and we've already identified multiple areas that our listeners could get value out of an exchange as such. Is it up and running now? Can our listeners now go and use it?
We're actually in what we call our beta trades. These are friendly trades. We're finishing up the technology. We want to make sure that it's out there properly. As Bryce said, there are certain things that we're adding in logistics, for example, to be able to choose which carrier you want to be able to take your product, whatever it is, from A to Z. So it's things like that we're adding in, little nuances, but functionally it's there. It's ready. We've done transactions. We've made things work. We know it works. What we want to do now before we put it out to the general public is just to make sure that it's fine-tuned. And that's really what these next couple of weeks are about.
I was going to ask. So is it weeks? Is it months?
It's weeks. It's weeks. It'll be open.
Is that accurate, Bryce?
Yeah. Don't take the chairman's word for it. He'll say yes to anything. There you go.
We have to stay in front of any issues. We have to make a marketplace that is as perfect as we can have it. The demand is there. So this is like Field of Dreams. You build it, they will come. We know that. It's needed. And we have to be in a position that everything's running smoothly, well-oiled machine. So when people come on with their livelihoods at stake, they can be trusted. They can trust us that it's going to go perfectly. We're going to do as best as we can to get right there.
Is this something that if someone wanted to invest in you guys, they could right now, or is that coming down the road too?
No, it's unfortunately it's kind of closed to investors here, but hopefully one day we'll be on the NASDAQ and people could talk about us then.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. My brain is swirling of all the things. We've got listeners that have sent us TikToks and Snapchats of them delivering special colored watermelons to a local market. We've got hogs and cattle that are grown with special diets. I mean, I'm looking forward to the next conversation that we get to have. Comparing the diets of a grain-fed calf and a grass-fed calf. So I mean, I can see a lot of different angles to where this can provide value.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tanner, you were talking about a global aspect to this. Look, right now there's a huge problem in Italy with olive oil. There's counterfeit olive oil coming out of Italy left and right, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. I was actually contacted by somebody out of Italy saying, can you help us? And I said, absolutely. All right, we can make sure, as long as we have access to the data coming out of the manufacturing centers, we can actually do something with that. Wine. Coming out of different regions within France. These are things that people are already talking about because, quite frankly, they're branded. They want to protect their IP. And this is one way of doing that also.
I've been listening to a bunch of history podcasts, and they were talking about how bootleggers during Prohibition, were saying it was true Scotch, but it was not anywhere close. But people didn't care. They just needed their alcohol. I didn't even think about taking this away from corn, soybeans, cattle, and other aspects of agriculture into products, finished products.
Oh, I think the biggest Wild West markets in my mind are the softs, cocoa, sugar, coffee. These are markets that literally are the Wild West. They need these markets more than anything else. So as we get our feet wet with cattle and get that going properly, look for us to probably get in and branch out into a lot of these other markets.
So we have great listeners. We have listeners that are on the forefront of agriculture. That's why they listen. Nobody listens to us if they don't care about improving what they've got going on. So they need to know, because they're going to ask us, what are their next steps? What should they do to be preparing for when you guys are ready to go live? Do they just check your website out? What do you think?
Check our website out. We'll have press releases, fairly often. So there'll be a lot going on, and over the course of the next few months, I can imagine more of a hockey stick curve as we ramp things up. And as Bryce said, there are people that are waiting to get on. Bryce, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, tell your friends. Tell them it's coming. It's about to be a lot better than it has been. Yeah. One of the things we're struggling with right now in our area is hay. Where are you going to find it? How much does it cost to get here? We've had a rough drought. It's bad. Price of hay has tripled, but there is hay out there, but those aren't my contacts. I don't know who these people are. So I look at Facebook and the amount of scams on there. Maybe I'm getting a good deal. Maybe I'm not. Like Craigslist, I just can't trust it. But with ours, it is trusted. It's verifiable. Everybody has been checked and vetted, and it's a marketplace that you can go for your outputs and your inputs. And so if you want to sell cattle or wheat and then turn back around and fertilizer, whatever it may be, it's a place to get the best deal. And I think it's going to serve so many different needs for people and fill so many different voids that just are really not there. The answers aren't there, and it's inefficient if they are.
So that popped up one more question in mind. You said verified and who's checking and all that. So there's so many different products in the world. who is developing the standards for this? Is it just the normal standards for number 2 yellow corn, or are you guys saying no, it has to go to this place to get tested? This person has to sign off on it.
We're being very particular. We're going to third-party testers. We're also working with the USDA to maintain a very credible relationship with them, to maintain the facilities that they're using so that they're incorporated and they're written into the data that you're actually seeing as an end user, as a buyer. But yes, that's very important. That's a critical part of what we're doing, is the verification. What Bryce was alluding to is the AML and KYC that's necessary for you to even come onto the exchange.
Hold on. AML and KYC.
Anti-money laundering and know your customer. These are provisions.
Good.
These are provisions that are put out by the regulators. And again, everything that we are doing, we're adhering to the regulators. So that way we know when somebody is coming onto the exchange to either buy or sell, who these people are, who they are they for real? Everything has been checked out. Their name gets checked out. These are things that are very important at the exchange level.
Throwing out the acronyms, I thought we were going to start talking about some cryptocurrency there.
No, we don't want to get confused.
No, that's
confusing.
not that. So.
Well, Bryce, did we miss anything that we should cover today, or did we get a lot of it sorted out?
I think we've done a good job. Appreciate y'all having on here. I'm trying to think what else might want to add. I'm very excited. This is, I tell people I'm working on this. This is what's going on. And, other farmers, like the beta people that I've been working with to do some beta testing. And they're like, do what? Like, there's nothing like this. Like, you mean to tell me that I can do this, this, and this, and this? I'm like, it's coming. And they're all very receptive. Some, I've had one person that was a little standoffish just because they were so big that they were more acceptable of the current structure, but it's because they knew it so well.
Right.
And maybe they were against a little bit of change, but that's not where a lot of people are.
Good.
If you're top dog in one little deal, you probably don't want things to change, but there's so many people out there that need this, and they can still keep on doing what they're doing. It's not going to affect them. We're not trying to make them change or anything like that. We just want to create another avenue for people to help them and bring everybody together.
I like that. I'm even thinking of Shay Myers and his naked onions.
No, yeah,
he could advertise those. A skinless onion.
He's got a lot of onions. He could.
Well, the problem with onions is that onions were actually declassified as a trading commodity, all right? Because there was a big problem with manipulation of onions back in the 1960s, I want to say, and it's one of the reasons why that's one of the few things we cannot touch.
Oh,
really?
I didn't even know that. Well, sorry, Shay.
Wow.
Can't sell your naked onions through the exchange.
So okay, so it has to be a commodity then. Like you can't go do. So I did grow aronia berries, which was like an up and coming market, not traded. So we couldn't do anything with that.
Well, we theoretically we could. It all depends on what we're talking about. For example, when we're talking about onions in themselves were a market that the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, said you can no longer trade. It's one of those weird laws that was put out there only because there was so much manipulation. Another one, by the way, is salad oil. All right, that's why we don't see salad oil as a trading commodity. You see soybean oil, but you don't see salad oil because there was a huge scam and a big corner in the 1960s by a guy named DeAngelis, and it was all being stored down in Alabama, and essentially it was oil on top and water on the bottom. And when they found out, sure enough, after the markets were limit up for weeks and weeks, they went straight down. And all of that caused a lot of angst amongst the regulators. And at that same time, you also had a big onion squeeze that took place. So because of that, those are the two commodities, as crazy as it sounds, which we just, as an industry, don't trade.
Salad oil. I don't know. I don't like a wet salad anyway.
Is it the oil that's like squeezed out of a salad?
I know it's an oil. I assume it's oil goes on top of it, like if you're sitting at Olive Garden and
What is it?
Well, I thought it was corn oil back then, which I assumed it was, but I think it was probably soybean oil. That's why they renamed it.
Okay.
That's funny. All right. Well, gentlemen, this has been a pleasure. I'm going to do my best to kind of summarize what we chatted about. While I'm doing that, you guys need to think of the answer to the question we ask every one of our guests. This will be almost the last time we get to ask this question before we move on to another one. What is the best advice you've ever been given? So be thinking about that. We'll make Jack go first since he's chairman. Bryce gives you a little bit more time to think about yours, and I'm going to summarize here in between so that way we can get into this. But we were here talking with the Global Smart Commodity Group. We had both Jack and Bryce here joining us, and ultimately we discussed how the blockchain can bring efficiencies to the cash markets. We talked about all the value that it can bring. We first sorted out that the blockchain is not cryptocurrency. We got that separated. So our listeners are not going to be confused. Whenever they talk conversation around a table, they're going to understand that cryptocurrency was a product of the blockchain. They're not related at all to FTX in the news, as far as that goes. But we know that this technology can bring value to the agricultural commodities area because it'll bring equity back to the producers. It's going to provide true price discovery. We are fixing inefficiencies in the marketplace. Even though you love your co-op, it might mean your co-op operates differently. We're going to create traceability. So maybe we can run into different markets to get more value, like with Corey's non-GMO corn or your grass-fed beef, to get some value out of that. We're getting ahead of any issues we have in tracking to make sure that what we are selling is what we are getting. We're going to try and continue to add efficiencies to the supply chain. Could use these in potential global trade relationships because this is a global market, whether that's Mexico and their recent corn obligation or Chinese products. This can go into metals. We talked wine, olive oil.
Salad oil.
Salad. We can't do salad oil. No salad oil. We learned a lot about salad oil itself. There could be a real impact to the cattle exchange because we know that everything that differentiates a calf being sold or a bull being sold doesn't have a great practice right now to verify its accuracy. We take a look at this and can put it into place. It's currently being run through its beta program, so you guys as listeners are one of the first people that get to learn about this exchange, and now you can talk education. You can talk smart about it because of this education. Essentially, it's a peer-to-peer network. It's going to be able to connect the producer with the consumer, whether that's a corporation or an individual, and set up smart contracts. So, Jack, how did I do?
That was about as good as I could have done. I think that was, you know what? It sounds like you've been studying this for years and years.
Just take a lot of notes. I appreciate that. But, Jack, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
The best advice I've ever been given is, number one, make sure you stay true to yourself. All right, and that is more personal, and one I would give to my son. Do something for with a purpose. But from a business standpoint, and this is something that's important. The best thing that was ever told to me was, do what you do best and delegate the rest.
I like it.
And when you do that, you find yourself to be very, very successful.
I like that. And Bryce, you?
Well, just one piece of advice. Is that right?
The best piece of advice.
Yes. Okay. That comes from my dad. And I've heard this thousands and thousands of times, as a young boy or young man, like you mess up. And every time Dad would say, once a job has begun, never quit until it's done. Be the labor great or small, do it well or not at all.
Oh.
And that applies to so many different things. And I don't know where he got that from, but it applies to just everywhere you go in life.
Absolutely.
A little poetry.
Jack, I think you got a good one there in Bryce. Keep a handle on him.
Oh, yeah.
He'll help keep pushing that through. We talked Global Smart Commodity Group today. Corey, what are you going to challenge our listeners to do before we sign off?
It's going to be centered right around that. We know they're coming out here soon. And I feel like I always have an open your mind type deal, which is kind of what we're trying to do with the shows.
Yeah.
But open your mind to change and for the good here. Check out the Global Smart Commodity Group. They'll be coming out with new stuff. Check out their website and think about on your farm what you could improve if you could get better quality, get your product in the hands of the right people.
Right. Absolutely. Good job. Well, gentlemen, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll make sure if listeners have any questions, we get them sent your way. There's probably going to be more conversations. So keep us in the loop. Keep us on your mailing list so when you're ready to rock and roll, we can get some people signed up for you.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thanks
Sounds
again.
great.
Thanks again for hanging out with
Thank you,
us.
gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Listeners, thank you for hanging out with us. And until next time, have a good one.